Η πρώτη ομιλήτρια είναι η κυρία Manuela Studer Karlen. Είναι λέκτορας και ερευνήτρια για την in late antiquity in Byzantine art στο Πανεπιστήμιο του Fribourg στη Γερμανία, και το θέμα της ομιλίας της είναι the depiction of the Christ Anapeson, the making of an image and its distribution.
The subject of this presentation concerns the relationship and influence of the liturgy in the iconographic programs of Byzantine churches and the predominant role of the Mount Athos in this process. My focus is on the complex interpretation of the depiction of the Christ Anapeson. The first apparition of the Christ Anapeson about the year 1300 on Mount Athos is in keeping with the general and prevalent tendency of the early Paleologian period to decorate churches with varied cycles which are not, however, primarily narrative in intent. Their functions are to convey the symbolic complexities and theological precepts. During a period of religious unrest, it was necessary to stress the real presence of Christ within the church. In this group of subjects of liturgical and sacramental symbolism stressing the role of Christ belongs also the image of the Anapeson. For the complex interpretation of the scene, it is necessary to consider the textual sources of the Old Testament, which serve also as a source for the inscriptions of the scene. The fundamental texts are in the first and in the fourth books of Moses, as well as in the Psalms, of which there are many interpretations. In the text of the Church Fathers, the line of Jacob's prophecy was identified with Christ and his death. Sleep was compared to the death and the resurrection of Christ. Therefore, in the liturgical, exegetical, and homiletic commentaries, the subject of Anapeson can mean the two important events of the Passion, the death and the resurrection. The depiction of the Anapeson sometimes bears the title of the whole verse, because the theme was based on Jacob's prophecy concerning the line of the tribe of Judah. Then the comparison of Christ with the lion has found a direct echo in the Serbian Psalter, where the lion was represented exceptionally next to the Anapeson, certainly according to a better theological interpretation of the image. Rarely, in this composition or near to it, is also represented Jacob holding a scroll where one reads the text of the first book of Moses, so in Vatobedi. Most often, the image has no inscription or only the abbreviation Ho Anapeson. Christ, as a child with open eyes, is resting on a cushion. He's leaning his head on his right hand. In his left hand is a rolled scroll. The first known image of Christ Anapeson is depicted in the Protaton monastery of Mount Athos. On the western wall of the Protaton, above the entrance, Christ Emmanuel is painted with open eyes, lying on a purple mattress. He is dressed in a chiton and a long himation that falls to his feet. Around his head there are only the letters of his name and no other inscriptions. The Hermeneia of Denis of Furna advise us, a quotation, to represent above the door the Christ under the figure of a small child of 3 years, asleep and lying on a carpet, his head resting on his hand. End of quotation. However, the location above the door is not the only place attributed to this picture. It changes according to the request. On the other hand, the chosen location already gives us an explanatory index for the meaning of the scene and proves his apotropaic character. The important parameters for the understanding are therefore the location and the iconographic context. The Anapeson image can respond to different demands. It is ambivalent and consequently has a great potential in the iconographic program. At Protaton, the Anapeson is flanked on both sides of the door by two archangels. The place above is occupied by the chimesis. Taking the context into consideration, we can see that the scenes of passion in the Protaton are subdivided into two groups corresponding to the rites of the Holy Week. It has been ascertained that the liturgy of the Holy Week, from Holy Thursday to Holy Saturday, had the greatest influence on the fresco painting. Here is the Anapeson. The cycle of the Passion was depicted according to the Passion narratives that are read out during the liturgy. In the Church of Protaton, in the second register, on the south wall are the episodes in relation to the Holy Thursday, and on the north wall, the scenes represented have a connection with Holy Friday and the Crucifixion. The Christos Anapeson on the west wall can do the connection between these two cycles. This first example already shows that the Anapeson is not an isolated image in the program. Subsequently, the topic appears in Byzantine churches of the 14th and the 15th century, included three other examples of Mount Athos. Its place within the church is variable. The iconographic details, the added figures, and the inscriptions are changeable. In the Berende, inscriptions, for example, or on the Stavronikita manuscript, in addition to Genesis 49:9, we have the last word, Basilou, which is not part of the biblical verse. More exactly, this text is the paraphrase of the 9th verse. In the morning liturgy of the Holy Saturday, the prayers refer twice on this text of the Old Testament. The last question is slightly modified. Christ is here more explicit, the king. This changed sentence is attributed to Sophronios of Jerusalem and used in a few cases even as an inscription for the Christ Anapeson. So, for example, in Berende or for the manuscript in Stavronikita. These cases give the proof that the image have a strong liturgical meaning, a sacramental reality. The Christ Anapeson also appeared on the front of the Sakos. The location of the picture is well considered because it is placed between the two protagonists of the Annunciation and directly above the crucifixion. The iconographic context reflects the essential connotations inherent in the Anapeson and links the birth or incarnation with the Passion. In addition, the meaning level of the resurrection is accentuated. On the front of the Sakos, the Anapeson is also placed in a programmatic relationship with the epitaphios. This clarifies the connection between the two images or their meaning during the rites. The Sakos is worn explicitly by the celebrant during the Passion ceremony. So you can see here the Anapeson and the epitaphios, this part. We can conclude that the Anapeson is not, of course, a narrative representation of the dead Christ. It is the Old Testament theophany reworked for the needs of the liturgy. However, it is worth paying attention to two representations of the Anapeson in which the attitude of the Virgin illuminates one of the ways in which the theme was constituted and reveals its relationship with the liturgy. The Anapeson was depicted at Vatobedi Monastery above the main entrance of the exonartex preceding the Catholicon. The Virgin is painted in an unusual attitude. Sitting, she embraces with two arms the Christ, whose head rests on his knees. On the miniature of Stavronikita, the Virgin is represented in a similar attitude. She holds her son. This intimate relationship between the mother and the son is frequent in the scene of the Lamentation of the Virgin. which is by no means random, since these subjects appear in the same liturgical texts. It is known that the text of the Threnos, sung at Vespers on Good Friday, probably exerted a direct influence on the iconography of Anapeson as it's shown in Vatsobedi and in the manuscript. It is supposed that the same passages of the oration of George of Nicomedia, read on Fridays and Holy Saturdays, on the dead Christ that the Virgin takes on her knees, also determined certain iconographic solutions. In the Vatopedi, it seems that the image of the Anapeson takes in the program the place of the crucifixion, which is lacking in here to show the death of Christ. And it gives visual rendering of the theological message of the death and the resurrection of Christ. For the signification of the Christ Anapeson in the context of the Passion, the Epitaphios Threnos plays a predominant role. The procession with the Epitaphios was known in church liturgy from the end of the 13th century on. In the Byzantine laments, we find the present contrasted with the past, when Mary juxtaposes the death of her son with his birth. In the 12th century, Byzantine artists added to the church repertoire a new subject, the Lamentation of the Virgin. It is the visualization of the salvation that Christ brought to the world through the Virgin Mary. The same holds true for the depiction in Vatobedi or in the miniature of the Stavronikita monastery. The incarnation is connected to the death and resurrection of Christ, and the representation reflects the liturgical and the ritual reality known from the spoken word. The exact origin of this ceremony, the Epitaphios Threnos, remains uncertain. From the 12th century on, the spread of neo-Sabbatic rite come to supplant the previously predominant liturgy of Hagia Sophia. Many 12th century typica were heavily derived from the Evergetes rule, and the typicon of St. Sabas for Hilandar from around 1199 is a Serbian translation of the latter. From the 13th century onwards, Mount Athos came to be an influential institution in the standardization of the divine liturgy. The mid-13th century diataxis of Philotheos Kokinos, the abbot of the Lavra monastery, emerges from this context of widespread liturgical standardization. Among other things, his work deals with the bearing of the epitaphios at the Great Entry. It can also be assumed that the liturgical use of the epitaphios corresponded to contemporary Atonaitic practices, and thus the rite of the Epitaphios Threnos. The diataxis of Philotheos Kokinos spread throughout the Greek-speaking world and also beyond, as it was translated in Slavonic by his contemporary Bulgarian Hagiorit Efthymios of Tornovo. The saint is portrayed in the church of Berende in Bulgaria, where also an image of the Anapeson can be found. The spread of the images correlates with the spread of the rite emanating from the important center of Mount Athos. In Berende, the sleeping Christ is painting alone. Beside him, there is a text taken from the liturgy. It has been ascertained that the depiction of the Anapeson is connected with the apparition of the contemporary rite of the Epitaphios Threnos. The liturgy affects the art on many levels. The very choice of subjects to be represented, their placement, the details of iconography within a composition, the overall conception of the scene in which it is presented. The Anapeson anticipates the death and the resurrection, unifies the incarnation and the passion, juxtaposing the Old and the New Testament. Another example of the simultaneous spread of the rite and iconography can be found in Georgia. As we have heard before, Eftime, translating numerous liturgical texts from Greek into Georgia, is regarded as an important mediator between Greek and Georgian culture, and these contacts were intensified in the following centuries. Interestingly enough, Eftime Eftime is portrayed in the Transfiguration Church in Sarsma, whose picture program contains a particularly large number of references to Mount Athos. The liturgical significance of the Anapeson becomes clear when it is placed in the center of the apse, where it took the office of the lamp above whom the bishops celebrate the Holy Liturgy. Sarsma's role model explains the spread of the Anapeson image in the Georgian churches. Thanks to the connection to the clearly Orthodox rite of Epitafios Threnos, the Anapeson image stands as a symbol of orthodoxy, as can be seen in some programs. So in Omorph Ecclesia, in Athens under the Latin rule, or in the churches of Crete. There are a lot of examples in Crete under the Latin rule as well, or as well in the Panagia in Kalamotti in Chios, under the rule of Genoa. The historical events motivate the choice of the Anapeson picture as a scene which clearly testify to the orthodoxy due to its connection to the Orthodox rite of Epitafios Threnos. In the church in Kalamotti, the Anapeson is also in the narthex above the door of the entrance to the naos. The represented images here show a very dense symbolism. Thus, in this period of widespread changes centered on the Athonite world and its spheres of influence, primarily the interaction between Serbia and Mount Athos must be mentioned, reflected in the liturgy and iconography. In the Archangel's Church in Lesnovo is written a Slav inscription of the Genesis 49:9. The program of the narthex is very complex. We look here at the eastern part and to the entrance to the main church. You can see the prefiguration of the Virgin around Anapeson. In the Manassia monastery of Rezava, also in Serbia, in the part above the western entrance to the monastery's church, the image of Anapeson is associated with the images of the two kings of the Old Testament, David and Solomon. King David carries a scroll with a quotation of the Psalm 44:24, and King Solomon another scroll with the quote of the Proverbs 21:1. It is easy to understand that the quote from David refers directly to the image of the sleep of Christ. As for the quotation from Solomon, it refers to the image of the hand of God holding the righteous, an image that in Rezava is painted above the Anapeson. In addition, there is another aspect. Next to Solomon, who is used in contemporary literature as a prototype of the just king, is the portrait of the church's donor, Stefan Lazarevich. The founder is part of the image of salvation created by the Anapeson and the hand of God. The depiction of Anapeson has a high devotional meaning. So it is in Rezava, where the donor Stefan Lazarevich is standing beside Anapeson and hoping the salvation of God. Regarding the relationship between the founder, the theological meaning, and the artistic conception, it can be said that Anapeson image reflects the Orthodox religion of the donors. In addition, it is chosen as a protective image, as proven by placement above the doors and the passages. The image promises resurrection and salvation. The Anapeson image corresponds to the desire to experience the right, real, and immediate. The image is inherent in mourning rhetoric in which the deceased founders and family members could be integrated. The commemoration for the living and the deceased, which are mentioned in the Hierubicon hymnos during the Epitafios Threnos, support this thesis. The depiction of Anapeson in the narthex is thus closely related to the founders. or here in Rezava, it's easy to see because the unusual lying position of Christ in the Trinity Church was determined by the possible proximity to the founder of Stefan Lazarevic, because it's on his left side. Or in the Banagi and Kalamoti, the relationship between the donor picture and Anapeson is underlined here as well, because the donors also turn to the Anapeson. All painters and clients share knowledge of contemporary liturgical tendencies, which presupposes the contextualized and symbolic representation of the Anapeson image. Thus, in several regions, the emergence of the Anapeson image could be linked with the contemporary translation of the current liturgical text from the Mount Athos into the local language. Thank you very much.
It was a marvelous piece of presentation. Thank you very much for producing this and presenting it in this room. 2 questions. The way you identified it as with Orthodox, as something significantly Orthodox, doesn't leave any room for something comparable in the Western art? First question. Second question, the commentaries on the Bible, on the verses that refer to, allude to that, do they bring to you any additional help for the interpretation?
Yeah. Okay, for the first question, I studied the churches in Crete, and there is a lot of examples of the Anapeson. And then I was asking me why this picture is represented. And as you had seen, it's always also mostly in a very good point, so it's easy to see. And so I'm quite sure that it must be a symbolic image as well, and because Crete was then under the Latin rule. But I know no example. I mean, like parallel in the Western art. I don't really know. It seems to me that the Anapeson, or with studying the other examples and the text as well, was a clear symbolic image for the Orthodox rite, and so it was a good. The meaning was clear, and it was a reason because it was very popular in, let's say, in the Cretan churches. So, but I don't know any parallel for the Western art because I'm not. And for the commentaries, yes, the commentaries has a lot of information. There is not the commentaries and also the psalms, because there is the Psalm 120 and 118, both of them playing an important role in the text of the Passion of the Holy Saturday, and the commentaries on the Psalms are then very important for the image, because they are describing, let's say, the Christ, his role in the Passion, or his role of sacrifice. Or there, I have other commentaries like the role of the Virgin, which I didn't discuss here, which is very interesting as well, because sometimes she has a function as a priest, as you have seen in Rezava, in Lesnovo, and sometimes she is absent. And so all these details are coming mostly from the commentaries. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions? Κυρία Παϊσίδου.
I will also, I'm grateful for this marvelous communication, and I would like to ask you concerning the example that you showed from Georgia. Are there other repetitions in this place where the Anapeson is in the place of Melismos? Do we know other repetitions?
Yeah, we have a second example in Martvili, also in Georgia. But these are the only example where it is in this location where the melismos is normally, and it's only in the peribleptos in Mistra, where it is also in the prothesis, or in Berende. You saw it is very near to the apse. But and I think it can be explained by some text for the prothesis, right? But in Georgia, it seems that it takes really the role of the lamp because it's in the middle, and I don't know. You can see he is very huge in this church. You can it is very a big image if you compare with the other representation in the apse as well. So it's very difficult to explain, but as you these are in the text as well. It makes a focus on the sacrifice of the Christ, I think.
We don't know if perhaps the Georgian ritual has something to appeal. No,
I don't know. I know Nino, but I have go in this direction.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you very
much.
Idea.
Ναι, σας ακούμε.
We also have this image of Anapeson connected with the divine liturgy depicted on the episcopal epigonation during the Byzantine period as the place of bishop as a moving picture.
Yes.
That's why.
And on the, I don't have the image here. And there, the Virgin, there are only 3 examples. And you have seen Lesnovo, and the other, I'm sorry, it's on the other. And where the Virgin is also holding a ripidon, like here. So on the epigonation, the sacramental meaning is very accentuated, exactly on this of Patmos.
Yes, on the epigonation of Patmos, and I think it is connected with the divine liturgy, and the Georgians are very much influenced by the Byzantines in their ordo, liturgical ordo.
Yes.
That's why we have this image of Anapeson in the placement of Melismos.
Yes, yeah.
Thank
but you know, the Anapeson, it is on Mount Athos, in Omorphi Ecclesia, in the churches in Serbia, in Kalamoti, in the Crete churches, in the Church of the Cross in Jerusalem, and in Georgia. So it's not, I mean, there are about 50 examples I have for the 14th and the 15th century. But that was, you say, it's exactly my thesis, that there must have some links between for the spread of the image. And I think that it's the liturgy who makes this.
And that's why it is depicted on the great Sakos of Photios.
Exactly, I think.
As the high priest as a moving image.
Yeah. And there it is very a programmatic meaning as well, because it is with the epitaphios and the crucifixion. Yeah, I'm really. Thank you.
Thank you too.